Sahasrara and welcome to another video. You are watching the Sacred Temple channel and it's great to have you here. So today I want to tell you about something that has been on my heart and is in the collective consciousness at this time. And I want to begin this by sharing a spiritual truth that everyone is welcome in the temple. This is something Spirit said to me as I move through channeling on this and learning about this topic. And this is something I want to reiterate through this whole video. Everyone is welcome in the temple. Today we are going to speak about Atlantis, truth, transhumanism, and the transgender movement, and how all of these things tie together and the ultimate darker agenda that's actually playing out through something like this and in our society at large. It's very important for us to understand this, particularly because in the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, which was a time period we have labeled that as before humanity shifted in consciousness, before the earth and humanity shifted into a lower density that we now experience as third dimensional, this experience where everything is very physical, where we can feel in illusion and there can be darkness and there can be disconnect from magic and spirit. There was a time where we were in a more ascended state, and it is natural for ascension and descension cycles to flow through. And in each of them, we have learning and growing to do. And we always have an opportunity to raise in our light collectively. So in the time of Atlantis, part of the reason that we fell into such depth and density is because of the chaos energy. And this chaos energy is what happens to humanity's consciousness when we come too far away from source or spirit, when we come too far away from nature, God force, and earth, and when we're no longer able to inhabit our physical form with our soul essence and our soul light. We need certain things in our reality to be maintained and a certain level of connection to nature, to God force, in order to stay energetically stable and to be able to hold our own God essence in us and remember who and what we are in the physical embodied sense of that and the mental and emotional spiritual sense of that. And in the time of Atlantis, I did go into this in a previous video. I think it's called The Magick of Atlantis or something with the word Atlantis in it. You can check that out. But in that time, there was a group of people who, especially in the governments at that time, and the sort of priesthood sort of classes, there were certain groups who became quite dark and they became affected by their own chaotic energy and their own loss of connection to spiritual life force energy. And this meant that they started to do very weird things scientifically. It didn't start out that way, but they got very power hungry, and that was due to various things, including, their own internal spiritual weakness, the changing of the light, the increase in the light that was trying to happen in the sun, and the fact that they started to become so away from themselves that they kind of would get high on this sort of magic. They got into a sort of power addiction. And all this combination of things and their own shadow meant that they really lost connection to spirit. And they were doing a lot of experimentation of how can we become and feel the most powerful, basically. And they sort of put themselves in terms of their sciences above God. So they started to go outside of the realms of nature or natural law, what we would perceive as the guiding principles of nature, the patterns of nature. For example, they started to create and wanted to create hybrid creatures and people, and enhance themselves and do all sorts of things. And eventually within that path, they recognized that they needed to fully make it as fully real as possible and actually sort of last, they needed to actually get into the DNA. Before that, they were doing bodily adjustments. And when you go and you mess with the DNA, that's the spiritual blueprint. That's like the blueprint that your soul essence is following along, like an outline or a blueprint. And it also contains a lot of other energetic and light information about you as a soul. And so going into that can also be very damaging to your connection to your soul essence and to receiving God force in other ways and all these things. So these people went down a very dark path. They contributed to a collective kind of, spirits telling me, like hypnosis, psychosis, that people even who weren't in that class kind of started to go with that due to their own shadows, due to giving up their empowerment and their self-leadership. And it got very dark very quickly, and it got very chaotic. And the fall of Atlantis was a tremendous shift into a lower density. And I remember the great walls of water that flew through Gaia. I remember dying in Atlantis. I remember great cliffs and crystals crashing. I remember explosions, and I remember the chaotic look in certain people's eyes as well, and the emptiness and the darkness that filled that space. And unfortunately, we are starting to see remnants of that in our society today. Part of this is natural, and this is what happens as universes and planets go through ascension cycles, and our collective consciousness, we will repeat old vibrations and patterns to grow, just as we do in our own individual incarnational path. And it's always an opportunity to rise into more light. And so that's why I want to speak about this today, and why this is very important for us to understand what's going on societally, so that we can see it from that higher perspective, and we can operate within that and find our truth and raise the light through that perspective, through that awareness of this huge learning that is happening for us as humanity. And so the thing is that these same souls and soul lineages and consciousnesses and groups of people still exist today, some in different ways and different form, like different incarnations, but that influence of those darker groups is still here today. And they are still on the same mission of trying to gain as much power as possible and trying to influence humanity's DNA. And this is all to do with their own personal agenda that over time has become, we need to live forever. They got disconnected from their own life force, so they look to falsely create it rather than actually let themselves go into a natural demise. This is something I've gotten more into the mechanics of that in other videos, because it is an energetic process of real death that they're resisting. And so they seek to feed on humanity's weakness and consciousness and energy. And they also seek to, yes, like live forever, and just they became addicted to the power and wanting to be alive instead of surrendering into the death process, so much that now there is a larger agenda for these groups to direct humanity and themselves to Mars. And Mars is a dead planet that is in a rest recuperation period, and they would like to go there and artificially re-alive it, just as they would like to artificially re-alive themselves through a larger agenda that will look like, and we could call, transhumanism. And it is similar to what I said in Atlantis, where they want to make adjustments to the physical form to feel more powerful, to live forever, to be above everybody. And just, yeah, to them, that's sort of a high perception of God. And these people have been in our governments for a long time still, and because of the density that we're in and other certain reasons, they have had a lot of influence. And, you know, one reason is that humanity has been in a little bit of a descension in the Kali Yuga, and it's been harder to be awakened. But we are coming into a great time of light, and so we must speak about these topics and we must understand what is going on. So I want to speak today about where this is showing up in society. And one of the huge places that this is showing up is in the transgender movement, what we could call the transgender movement. And I want to preface this by saying my truth with that this is not a negative attack or judgment on anybody who identifies as a different gender than their physical sex. It is simply what is occurring energetically. And yeah, as I said before, everyone is welcome in the temple. So I want to speak about the way that these satanic groups' agendas show up in our society. If you look at the transgender movement and what is happening there, where one group of people have one idea of what it means to be in freedom, what it means to be in free expression, what it means to be healthy, what it means to be safe, and another group of people who directly oppose that and they're directly opposite say, no, that's exactly what you're doing is exactly unsafe. What you're doing is exactly making me not free and making you not free. And there is opposing, they both think the same thing, but they're opposing. And this creates an energy of what? Disunity. This creates war instead of unity. And how interesting is that we are moving into a time cycle, an ascension period that in its full expression will be unity. And what does this process remind us of? These key themes remind us of? Exactly like the COVID thing, exactly like the C thing. I'm still not sure if I'm allowed to, if my channel is going to be okay if I say these words or not. So in the C thing, there were groups of people who had opposing ideas of what is health and what is safety, and they were directly opposite. And each group felt that the other was an inversion of the other's idea of safety, health, freedom. And what do you know? It's happening again. Also in that situation, particularly to do with the V, getting the V medicine, if you didn't get that, some people were vilified by the people who thought that everyone had to do that in order to create safety. But this group was not doing it because they felt that it made the opposite of safety. It made them unsafe and it made them unhealthy. And this group thought that this group was bad, and this group thought that this group was bad, and that they thought that they were good, and that if you took this V thing, you're virtuous and you're a good person and it's for the greater good. And if you're not, then you're selfish and you're villainous. And again, the same thing. Disunity. And mixed in with both of these issues is a massive feeling of unsafety. Being at war like that in a society that needs to have an agreement upon some core values in order to run as the one same society, when there's that disagreement, it creates instability, disunity, and it makes everybody feel unsafe. When people feel unsafe, they will often dissociate. When people feel unsafe and they are dissociating from their body and from life as a coping mechanism, they are much more susceptible to psychological manipulation. That is just simply how human psychology works. If you are dissociated or if you are in fear, you can be much more easily manipulated. If people are very severely dissociated, they can have ideas and beliefs planted into them while they're in that state. And that is the core underpinning of how these cult groups run their deeper processes. As a survivor of that, I can confirm that is what happens. Dissociation is created intentionally because they know that if someone's dissociated, it's easier to implant a hypnotic suggestion or something that I would like that person to do. And the way that they always control is through fear and unsafety. to get you to dissociate, to manipulate you, or just simply to threaten you and threaten your survival-based needs. And again, if we look at this issue, what does it trigger in us? It triggers unsafety and all that, and also the mechanism of tribe, of social belonging, which is another survival need. So this is a mass psychological manipulation that is being intentionally done, regardless of your actual truth or perspective on the core issues here. We need to constantly rise above and understand that what you see on the surface, there is more going on. This is what allows us to see truth. The other thing that allows us to see truth is that we must be more committed to truth and growth as a person and as humanity than my need to feel like I'm a good person or that other people will think I'm good. My attachment to being good. Humanity, most people have a massive attachment to being good because it is equated to self-worth or being a worthy, lovable person. And again, this is why people who, let's say, are going with the distortions that are being presented to them, such as the V and such as the transgender movement, which I'll get into more detail soon, their need to be good bypasses their ability to actually see what's going on with truth. Your attachments create blind spots. My attachment to being good makes me blind to anything that would contradict that would make me feel like, or actually make me, if it was possible, make me societally, let's say, a bad person. And I need to not get stuck in that attachment. I need to be above that attachment. I need to be healed in that. And I need to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I need to be willing to also feel pain or unsafety in order to see clearly in a situation like this. And if you don't yet have the tolerance, like the capacity within yourself to feel all that discomfort and the reality, the unsafe reality that is actually going on, and what it would mean if what I'm saying is true. It would mean that people are being victimized. It would mean that there is these groups of people who have a lot of power. It would mean that perhaps if you're involved in this, that you've been duped. All of that, you need to be willing to feel all of that discomfort and potential pain in order to see clearly. And that's why, that's a huge contributing factor, I should say, to why some people are so committed to this path, even if it is clearly an illusion or a delusion or a manipulation, and why some people are completely disagreeing, and why both parties feel like the other one is crazy and also unloving and all those things. They have a completely different mindset, more than mindset, a different psychology that is operating at this time. And that's only going to continue. So we need to really get what's going on psychologically. This is so important. And you need to sit with yourself. If you want to see truth in any issue and in this time period, you need to constantly recommit to truth. You need to be willing to be like the bad person or not mainstream and all that. You need to be willing to see truth even if it makes you feel unsafe. You need to be willing to feel fear. You need to be willing to, again, meet yourself with love. The willingness to move through these things and feel fear, and the capacity to do that, and the capacity to see difficult truths and to let go of attachment, psychological attachments and attachment in general, is that I have personally, I always teach that it's because I have a resting point. It is because I am committed to the God force or my soul essence above everything else. And I trust that above everything else. And I will live through anything and face any darkness to meet myself in love. It is a commitment to love. And if you have that, you will move through this time with greater ease and greater kindness as well. So that is the psychological manipulation that is going on. And I want to speak about also looking at these situations, because again, it's not just today, it's the transgender issue. You know, a while ago it was the C issue. There's probably going to be another thing that society gets grabbed by, and this is got a larger agenda. So we can often work out what is the agenda that is wanting these people want to have happen, what's actually trying to be made to happen, by looking at the impact of the presented mainstream narrative. So on the surface, the transgender movement looks beautiful. It is absolute expression of people. It is, you know, this is a perception. It is freedom. It is acceptance of differences. It is tolerance. It's quite beautiful if you look at it that way. However, in this time period, and due to who's like in charge and influencing a lot at the moment, we are going to repeatedly see false inversions of the truth. And an inversion is a false version of something else. I'm going to say that again. The inversion of the God force is always a false version of something that looks like truth. So the false version, this looks like more truth. It looks like more freedom, more expression, more liberation, more light. But it's actually a ploy to go deeper into illusion. And we will see that again and again and again, because this is a time period of revealing truth. It is a time period of the light raising. So there's just this natural process. But it's also because we are dealing with Satanists. And Satanist people, or a dark occult, these people of influence, Illuminati, all it's the same people, same words. They are in service to the inverted path. So, I'm just thinking about another way to explain this. So, natural. So, being in alignment with the God force, being in alignment with love, being in alignment with my soul essence and Mother Earth. What's the darker part of that might be, darkness might be, oh, I'm just a bit disconnected, and, you know, we're using plastics and we're just generating all this garbage and blah, blah, blah. And that's darkness and shadow, and that's not great, right? It starts to become inversion when things go completely false. So when we start to make a false earth out of the garbage, when we start to make a false consciousness out of our disconnection from true consciousness, when we start to make a false body out of our disconnection from our true physical form, which is holy. And this end of things is rooted in the God force energy. And the inverted is what happens when you come so far away from God force energy that it cannot sustain, and you have to attempt to create these false things that can kind of hold energy. And let me tell you that someone who has got an inverted energetic system because their consciousness has gone so far away, and something that's artificial, a machine or a person or whatever, it can hold a very limited amount of energy before it needs to feed again, because the issue is that it is disconnected from the God force and it cannot sustain. It cannot sustain, it cannot self-regenerate, and it is trying to. These people, as I said earlier, there is what's actually meant to be happening is a natural process of demise for them. But they keep trying to loop it and feed it because they're resisting. So that's what an inversion is. An inversion is classic satanic cult. And all of this psychological manipulation is classic satanic cult. And when you've lived through it like I have, it is quite obvious, and it is quite disturbing how mainstream it is, and it is honestly a little bit painful to see people go along with that. So we need to be on the lookout for distortions, and anything that is an inversion and it is away from God is unhealthy. That is the truth. That is the simple truth. You know, garbage food, junk food is unhealthy for me because it's lost so much of its life force energy. Anything that is false is away from the God force, and that's why there is this split in the collective at the moment, people moving more and more towards nature and eco-villages and circles and living free in that sense and becoming more spiritual and more awakened. And there seems to be this polar opposite of people going deeper into VR, like virtual reality society, into disidentification and disembodiment with their physical form. One form of which is by having such a challenge with my gender, the physical sex that I have. But again, this disconnection from the body could come up in any way, that I start to disembody from my own body, and I start to change my body, and I start to create an inversion of that. All of this is the exact intention of these people, because we can look at the impact of what does it create. Let's look at the impact of a loss of gender / polarity. Okay, if we're talking about binary gender or polarity, we're also talking about polarity energy, masculine energies, feminine energies. If we lose this concept, what happens? The dissolution of the feminine, and consequently the holy masculine. This is because the feminine is what is rising at this time as Mother Earth goes through a bit of a feminine process of birthing. She will later go into a process of building, but right now she's trying to go into a sort of feminine death, I should say, into a surrender place, and then into a birth. And that's why a lot of women are being awakened spiritually at this time. The divine feminine movement is getting stronger and stronger every day. And yet so is over here in society this dissolution of the idea of what we currently know as feminine, woman, all of that which represents and embodies the polar feminine energy. And we also, through that loss, we consequently lose the holy masculine, which will be later needed for Earth's ascension as well as humanity's, of course, for building. And obviously both of these energies, they need to be, once they are both more full and whole in themselves, they will create an energy of unity. This will create an energy of the spark of life, of synergy. This is the power of threes. And it is what all life births through. It's how the God force births things. And this is going to create unity, heaven on earth, ascension, 5D, whatever you call that. And I wanted to just make a note. If you see me looking over here, I have some notes. So we need both the feminine and the holy masculine to rise. And also the holy masculine, typically in the process of spiritual energetic mechanics, it doesn't rise until the feminine is more whole enough in itself. And we see that in our own internal journey, and we'll see that through nature and everywhere. The feminine initiates the masculine. That's just sort of how it works. Okay, so one part of what this will do is injure the natural process of Earth's ascension and humanity's ascension into unity. One way this will come about is the loss of the concepts, but also the losses that will go on in the physical human form. These surgeries and things sometimes create sterilization. Depending which one and which gender and certain things. These can create a sterilization in the body. We will block new souls, and I for one believe that these people likely have an agenda to block higher lineages of souls that would like to come through at this time. Many people are aware of the depopulation agenda that is a part of the transhumanistic agenda that is fueled by a few things. One, what I just said, also their belief that they are gods and that like certain groups of people are better than others, and there's a certain godlike way that you need to be and certain people shouldn't procreate. They have very strange beliefs around that. Okay, so it's also creating a sterilization and a loss of fertility in the body. That's a loss of future children. That's who could also hold higher light. When we do these adjustments to the body, we are injuring the body. The body is not able to run as it naturally should. Therefore, it cannot hold the light that it naturally should or would. Therefore, it certainly will have a challenge to hold a healthy, spiritually healthy, light-specific, healthy birthing process and soul in it. So what this also does, the other impact, if we keep looking and talking about the impact, is that there is a disconnection and dissociation from the body. So someone who has been born with a physical sexed body then says, no, this isn't me, this isn't right. They are disconnecting. There's a sort of disconnect from the body. And as they have that struggle, that gender dysphoric emotional struggle, which I have a lot of empathy for and I'll get into in a little bit, they typically will dissociate away from the body. So if dissociation is resisting and saying, no, that's not me, they're kind of pulling away and dissociating, just as those people in Atlantis did and began to. And when we dissociate, it creates an empty kind of vacuumous space. Our higher self is no longer sitting in the throne of our energy. Our own energy is not sitting there. Our own energy is flown away into an illusion. And when you've done that, you've lost magnetic power, you've lost soul radiance and soul power embodied and accessible to you. And you've also injured your physical form so that it can't hold as much soul radiance. It just can't. And this means that darkness energy, lower beings are free to come and inhabit. There will be an increase in lower energetic attachments and influencing humanity's consciousness in this way. Obviously, this also brings us into, as I've said earlier, this artificial way of living away from nature. And it doesn't just stop at adjustments to the body related to sex. This will go towards transhumanistic. This being accepted, and for everything being accepted, we start to draw outside the lines and the natural boundaries and guiding principles of nature, and everything's okay and everything's accepted. The end goal for these people is that transhumanism and its perspectives, like that an AI is a person, that people should become AI or digitalize their consciousness and their energy, that robots can have personhood. This will become eventually normalized. And it starts with, I am a man even though I'm physically have the body of a woman. And it keeps going into this. Some people these days are saying, I identify as a cat, and they live and act like a cat, and they think of themselves as a cat. And some people will say, I am a tree. And I've seen people say, I am disabled, when their physical form isn't disabled in that way that they've identified with. And this means that mental injuries and this dissociative process and injury to a natural identity that's happening and delusions that are happening will continue to be accepted, and people won't heal. People will not heal. Their consciousness will stay where it is. The ascension of humanity will stay where it is. And I've also seen this is sort of shown a lot when we look at the dissociative identity disorder community. And there's a whole thing, I could make a whole video about that topic as someone who lived with dissociative identity disorder for a long time. But dissociative identity, I have seen medias and things of people saying, hi, I'm a DID system and this is blah, blah, blah talking. I am a bird. I have red colored feathers, like blah, blah, blah. And the people on the other side to them are completely accepting of it, and it's completely their reality. This was not my experience, and it's not a healthy experience of healing with dissociative identity disorder. This only will solidify the dissociative identity disorder. There's caveats to this that I'll go into in a moment, in a little bit. But this means that people with DID will not heal. And that really bothers me. It also, do you know that people who are in typical Satanistic cults, like the one that I was a part of, Often they have DID. Almost everybody there has DID. This is because the programming in these cults, the psychological manipulation that is done, intentionally sets up separated, boarded off parts of the personality in order to operate in the way that they do, in order to victimize in the way that they do. They use dissociation, they use it deliberately. They want everyone in there to have DID so that you can't remember the torture, so that it's very hard to heal, so that you're easily manipulated. And they do this through trauma, torture, hypnosis, drugs, and in great intention. And a lot of people in these cult groups, these people in power, in influence, Illuminati, all of that, they have DID. They want it to be societally accepted, completely accepted. They also have a pedophilic agenda. Pedophilia is absolutely a core part of satanic ritual abuse and these dark occult groups. We are already seeing, I've already seen media of it, of people who say, I'm a 50-year-old man, but I identify as a 13-year-old boy. And right now, that's just where it's sitting. But there's also, if you follow the documentation, and I may link some videos below of people who have done the research, there is a whole group of people who would like pedophilia to be accepted as a sexual orientation. And this is a way to do it. And these people in Satanism are all pedophiles. And if we can accept, oh, let's everybody have, like, say how you feel, you're a 50-year-old man, but I honor that you're a 13-year-old. And also, if they have DID, they may literally have a 13-year-old part. And so it will be like, wow, this person is really 13. That doesn't make it okay, but they will try to make it okay. And all of this comes from the loss of these truth boundaries and nature boundaries. And it is very clear to me that this is completely satanic and that it is not the fault or intention of many people in the transgender movement, supporters, or people who do identify as trans or non-binary, or what, that whole spectrum, or even the people that are struggling with DID and starting to be more open and in what's going to become an unhealthy way. This is nobody's fault except the people who are influencing it to be this way. And it is the responsibility of the people involved, whether you're transgender, supporter, opposing, whatever. It's the responsibility of all of us to keep recommitting to truth and seeing truth and loving ourselves and humanity enough to do that. It's our collective responsibility to see this and to remove these people from influence, from our own psychology, and then to the larger. And we will not be able to do that if we cannot find our recommitment over and over to truth and love and humanity's ascension. So basically what I'm saying with this and the intentions of this, the long-term intentions of this, is that I wrote something that I think summarizes it. The agenda is to dissolve boundaries so that darkness is accepted, so that darkness is inhabited into the human form. Once darkness is accepted just on the sort of surfacey psychology of humanity, then darkness can enter the human form. And darkness can much more easily certainly enter the human form if we have gone into an inversion in our own form, whether that's transgender or becoming some sort of animal person, or full transhumanism and adding like objects and metals and things or electronics to my form. Okay, and again, I want to make a caveat here while I think of it. This whole conversation excludes a conversation about certain medical technologies that are safe and will help people, certain benefits of AI that is good and will help people, and people who are intersex and other things like that does sometimes happen. I have actually experienced gender dysphoria within the larger framework and context of my dissociative identity disorder that I had from the repetitive trauma of the satanic cult that I grew up in. Within that experience, I had what you could perceive as and what were male parts or alters, alternate personalities. I also had animal parts and like a robot part and all these different parts of myself. And this is because of a combination of things. One is the natural effect of dissociation and the splitting of the personality that will happen to any child who goes through repetitive and severe enough trauma at a young age. The other part of it is that these groups intentionally create many and specific kinds of alters because they are very skilled programmers of the mind. And they want to create hidden parts of the self, and they have a certain system to do that they use on most of the children and people that then become adults, obviously. So most people who have this experience will have male parts, female parts, like an angel part, like anything you can think of, because of the complexity of the programming and the complexity of the trauma itself, and the way that that person had to create so many different survival strategies because the trauma was so multi-layered and it wasn't just one kind of trauma. That's just how DID works. So in my experience, I would have male parts and they would come out in therapy. And when I was in those male parts, I would like take off my jewelry and tuck up the frill thing on my my jumper and put my hair back. And being in the female body felt very, very, very beyond words uncomfortable. It was just wrong. And this feeling is more than, and again, I suspect that this is maybe somewhat what transgender people are feeling, which is that it is more than just a feeling. It is beyond, almost beyond words. It is, I am this. And for me, you could not tell me like that I was a, woman, blah, blah, blah. And even though I could logically see it, my brain, my mind at that time couldn't accept it. And it wasn't even computable. And if my therapist had just come at me and said, shut up, you're a 30-year-old woman, you're not a child, you're not a boy, you're not blah, 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 that would have been very injurious and unkind, and it wouldn't have helped me at all, because it doesn't help. It is not the job of everyone to run around and say you are wrong to this person's brain. Okay. But that feeling of being so different than yourself, that it's even giving it words is like limiting, is very painful. And it's sort of dissociated. So sometimes we may not even be aware of the pain. We may not even be aware that it's painful, but it is inherently painful to be disconnected from the truth of who and what you are. And when I would change my top, or I would take my jewelry off and I would become more masculine, I would feel a sense of relief, and I would feel less dissociated, and I would, in a way, the illusion was still there, but I would feel less dissociated. My symptoms would be less. And this is why a lot of people who go through transgender or start to cross-dress start to feel better mentally, because it's simply that they are getting relief from the resistance that they're feeling against themselves and against their own body constantly. That's going to make you feel better. That isn't the end of healing. That is a part of healing. If my psychologist had said to me, okay, yes, you are a boy, and a lot of my parts are different ages and stuff, but like, you are a boy, let's go get a surgery. You do have multiple personalities, or a bird alter. Let's go get adjustments to your body to reflect that so that you feel better. That would have been absolutely malignant and abusive of her. And it is not the truth. And I'm so glad that I did not have this experience. I'm concerned for people in therapy when it's 10 years from now if this is still going on. And people are just being wildly accepted as the full, like, just be who you are expression of what's going on for them, and never getting past into coming home to who you are. So even though, and especially for DID, and this was where it may differ for transgender, because I can't speak to that because I'm not that person, but certainly for DID, when I was a child part, so if I was switched into a 5-year-old boy part, or, you know, a little animal part, and the animal parts of DID systems, by the way, are just a traumatized child's best representation of them. Obviously, you cannot actually be an animal. Just like obviously you cannot actually be a boy if your form is a girl. And but I would not be able to access the adult part of myself, or the regular everyday part of myself. At a certain point in healing and in therapy, I could, because the barrier between them had softened, because we had done work on the root cause of the trauma, the reason that barrier and identity confusion was there. We went deep and we did the work there, and so that could soften. But until that point, I could not actually access that when I was in the child part. And there was also a learning and a healing of accepting and loving that part of me, because I needed to accept and love that I had a part that felt male instead of push it away. I needed to accept and love parts that felt like they were children, and more than felt like, again, like you can't access it, so you are a child. And I had coloring books, and I still have some little toys and things like that for soothing my child parts. And this is the process of surrendering and allowing the resistance to what currently is. So for me, it was current that I had different parts, and that I was a boy, or that I was a child part over here. That part of me couldn't just keep pretending that I'm an adult self all the time, because that was blocking me from healing. So there's a point here about acceptance and about recognizing the power of acceptance and internal freedom and relief from accepting where your consciousness currently is. And I'm not sure, but perhaps that is a part of the journey of healing with the gender confusion, is to, you know, as I say, not go to the extreme opposite and start like attacking people, or as my therapist had yelled at me and said, don't do that. I couldn't not do that. And maybe it's the case for people who have this experience as well. But it is not the end goal. And it is not right or loving for all of society to come at people and say, and to agree with their delusions in a mass societal way, and say you are, you know, a boy when you're actually a girl, and help them be away from the God force in themselves, and help them suffer in that way. And as I say, I'm so glad that that didn't happen for me. And I also, because it is happening for people with DID at the moment, as an extension of what was originally just a shift in identity and expression and freedom around gender, has gone into this thing with the DID. And what other illnesses is it going to go into? And gone into the thing with people who identify as differently abled, even when they're actually completely physically abled, and they have an able body. It's going to keep going, and that is the challenge with this issue. It is not a hate on people who are having this experience of different gender perceptions. It is concern about this, and it is constantly trying to refine and bring ourselves back to truth. And it is concern about suffering for all people here. And yeah, so people, and there is studies and reports on people who have gender confusion, or identify as a different gender, who have not only gender dysphoria but also dissociative disorders. They often have a history of trauma, and upon further investigation, if society had gone down this path of actually healing in this sense, I believe that they would find a lot of links, and I've already read a few papers about this from different people. And it is absolutely horrific that there are these darker groups of people who are taking advantage of people who are having an experience in their body and their consciousness and using it for their own manipulation and agenda. And that is why we need to come together and be in truth to protect one another and to move through this with love. Because love is going to dissolve all illusion, and love is stronger than the weakness of these people. It always is, and it always will be. So the experience of that, when I asked Spirit, what is actually happening for someone who has a transgender, and I said, teach me. I said, please teach me. May I speak truth about this? May I be a vessel for love in this? Spirit speaks to me about people with this challenge on a journey of and a learning of coming home to themselves, and that they don't feel at home in themselves, and they don't feel a sense of belonging with themselves, and that's the journey of coming home to who and what you are. And that's what we need to remember in this. And that was certainly, although different, that was certainly my journey in a way of coming home to who I am, being so disconnected through dissociation and disembodiment, and coming home to the love. And I'm so grateful that no one ever said to me, yes, you are a bird person, or whatever my child alters felt they had to be to survive. And I will say that, as I said, there was that transitional period where the people that love you and the people that maybe a therapist, the people that are close to you, do need to honor where you are, and they need to meet you where you are. So, and I had people in my life who said, I don't want to refer to Becc as like more than one person, because she's just one person, and this is, it's weird. And my therapist explained to them that, this is about, for right now, this is about Becc owning that these parts of herself exist, and loving them and accepting them. And then over time, through correct therapeutic approach and time and love and patience, my brain and me is able to slowly accept, gradually integrate the true reality that I am one person, that I've always been one person, and I just needed support to dissolve the root cause of why I had that illusion in the first place, and that disconnect from myself in the first place. This whole situation, for the larger agenda we're speaking about today, the agenda is the absolute chaos that these people want to re-emulate from the time of Atlantis, because it's what they remember as their truth and their, and they want to have a complete inversion and loss of humanity's sovereignty. They worship technology and AI because they feel like, and they're drawn to it because in a way it is the only thing that they can become in order to keep living forever. Except when you live forever like that, it's actually a deadness. Obviously we know that something like an AI or a computer, like metal, an object, is not alive in the same sense. And that's where their delusion is. But basically they don't want to see that because of the pain that they would have to face to process and to move into a proper death and rebirth process. I have already had people email or message me with negative, judgments and things regarding my perspective on this, even just from very small things that I have shared on Instagram. And I wanted to share that I'm okay if you have that perspective. And I'm okay if, you feel that there's phobia here or hate here. And I am sorry about that, because I deeply care. And I also don't expect you to believe that if you're having any pain around this. And if you are a client of mine or someone that's followed my work and, this upsets you, then I just send you love, and I just wanted to acknowledge you, basically. I wanted to acknowledge you, and that I have thought about that in this, and that, I care deeply about my followers and my clients. I pretty much know if you do comment and make yourself known, I know your energy. I like everyone's name has a different color. Like I know you in a little bit of a way. And so I really care about you. And I guess all I can say is I wanted to honor that and mention that, especially given that I've already had some people in pain messaging me about this. And I wanted to say too, I'm just thinking what else I want to say. So I remember the first time that I met somebody who was transgender. And I remember just whenever I was around this person, I would get a very weird energy feeling, and I couldn't quite name it because I wasn't familiar with that energy. Like if you haven't seen a color before, you probably can't name it. But I remember the energy was one of confusion, and my own confusion, and it was a very innocent, childlike confusion of like just no judgment, just like what, like I don't understand, and also that their system was going backwards. There were certain parts of the energetic structure that were going backwards, and later I was told by someone like, oh, this person's transgender, and I was like, oh, okay, so like, and then it kind of made sense what their energy was doing. And I feel that that's very telling about the truth of this, because I know that I wasn't trying to see anything about this person. I know that I wasn't coming at it from any bias. It just was. And that is what I see energetically and psychically. I see, and on the physiological level, I see that the form has been changed, that the form is injured, that the processes in the body are not running healthfully, and that the energetic flow is not running powerfully or as healthy as it otherwise would. And that people are, like, especially in the region of the sex organs, they are disinhabited, like their energy flow is gone from that area. And as I said, when you go from anywhere in your body, and we all are a little bit because we all have things that we're processing and healing and trying to come home to our body and feel safe. But when you do this, it does leave you susceptible to lower entities. So sometimes I also see lower entities attached. Again, can happen to anybody, but with this, they can also be enhancing that perception. Occasionally, I want to say also occasionally that the whole transgender or different gender, non-binary, the whole spectrum experience is kind of being influenced by attachments or past life experiences as well. But again, we all have past life experiences that are influencing us. So I just wanted to add that in terms of the psychic perception of what I see, and part of why I speak to this. And I also see that the polarity and the magnetism is greatly lessened, and that the connection, I'm also listening to spirit right now and seeing something, because the connection to I'm listening to spirit, because the connection to the earth has been so heavily disrupted, especially by synthetic chemicals, and synthetic perceptions in the mind, and that sort of disinhabiting, the ability to produce and receive light is lessened. And I keep seeing sort of just an image of the sun and also the DNA, because of the way that higher light is necessary to awaken our DNA, which informs the rest of our light flow and is a huge, like the core part of our ascension process. Sending so much love to everybody. Thank you for being here today. If you haven't already, please do like, comment, and subscribe. That really supports my channel and supports the growth and message that I want to give to the world. As we are a community, okay? Like this, the way that I'm speaking now is because I'm concerned about our collective. And I want us all to remember that we are the collective of humanity, and we are the earth as well. And so all of our voices matter. And so please write your comment below, or just stand in your truth, hold your truth. Don't be afraid to speak your truth. At the same time, be of love. And yeah, remember that love is dissolving to all illusion, all fear, all darkness. It cannot withstand the presence of your love.